If you're looking to level up your card making game, let me introduce you to some crafting hacks from Gina K, Jennifer McGuire, BB Cameron, and Cathy Zielske. In this video, I'm sharing 20 genius hacks I've picked up from these legends. From masking tips that'll make your stamps work harder, to gluing tricks that'll keep those doomed card friends and die cuts away from the trash can. These are the hacks that saved my sanity. But before we dive into the sticky stuff, let's kick things off with the backbone of card making. Die cutting hacks that will make your crafting life a whole lot easier and way more fun. Let's get started. I'll begin with one of my own hacks since it creates more efficiency when layering sentiments or other die cut elements. Here is an example. This is a curved banner. I wanted to stack 2 of these banners for reinforcement before using foam tape for more dimension. I think you can see that there are 2 layers stacked together. Now, instead of having to cut out the 2 layers separately, what I often do is glue 2 layers together and then die cut them. Let me show you what I mean. Here's some brush black cardstock from Spellbinders. I want to die cut out the word from this die set. Now, instead of having to cut them out and glue them individually over and over again, I just glue 2 layers at a time and then die cut them. This reduces the number of times I need to pass it through my die cutting machine. I won't usually layer it up 3 times because it's harder to pass through the machine. This results in a beautifully thick sentiment layer, and if you want to use more layers, then double up another piece of cardstock and die cut another layer. Also, it's far easier to glue thicker pieces together than flimsy, intricate layers. So doubling up before die cutting is a great way to create more efficiency. Now here's hack number 2, and it's a great segue after the previous hack that I showed you, because this is all about better die cutting. And I learned this from Gina K of Gina K Designs. Sometimes the die doesn't cut through the cardstock completely, especially if the cardstock is thicker. When that happens, I flip the entire sandwich and have the cutting side of the die facing up and then pass it through again, and it cuts beautifully. When creating the second sentiment, I fold the cardstock over, add glue, and cut it out again. Next, I'll demonstrate another hack on how to hold small die cut pieces in place if you want to do paper piecing. For instance, I applied painter's tape over the openings on the non-cutting side of the die, so it holds the cardstock in place. A die with bigger openings would work best, but it worked on this one as well. After the die cutting, apply glue behind the cut pieces you want to transfer to your card panel. And bring your card panel over and press it down. All the glued pieces will adhere to the card panel. A couple of pieces may fall off during the process, but it's much easier to glue a couple pieces back together than trying to glue all of them, especially if you have an intricate die. If you have a detailed die, this method works beautifully. And this is a 2-for-1 technique because you get 2 cards out of this one die cut. One with the negative space and one with the inlaid pieces. The next set of hacks is all about masking techniques. This technique compels your supplies to work harder than you can imagine. You'll find yourself becoming more adventurous with your supplies, especially your stamps and stencils. Ready? Alright, so here is a masking technique that has proven so handy over time. I first watched Jennifer McGuire demonstrating this hack. If you have masking paper, you can use it. But if you don't have masking paper, no worries, because you can use sticky notes. I'm going to use the stamp set from Salmon Says Stamp. I'd like to use the gift boxes here and have the balloons flying from behind them. So first, I'll stamp the gift boxes and I'll use my acrylic block to pick it up. I'll condition the stamp. And by the way, this is another hack I learned from Gina K. So now my stamp is conditioned. This is especially useful for photopolymer stamps because they're usually covered in a sticky residue from the manufacturing process. So rubbing your fingers over the stamp removes this residue and makes it ready for use. All right, so going back to the hack we were working on. I'll use my VersaFine Onyx black ink, and at first I'll use a scrap piece of paper to make sure I'm getting a good impression. I save my scraps just for this purpose. Now, what I want to do is have these balloons flying from behind the gifts. If I stamp them over here, you'll see the balloon strings in front of the gift boxes, and that's not what I want. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to stamp it on a sticky note, and I'll stamp it close to the adhesive band of the sticky note, so I don't need to use additional adhesive to hold down the mask when I'm stamping. Now I'm going to take this and cut along the outline. I can get by without cutting out the entire stamped image because I'll have the balloons flying from the right side. I need to cut really close to the outline because if you leave any space around the border of the stamped image, when you superimpose the next stamp, you will see a gap around the outline of the original image, which is not ideal. But if you cut it really close to the line, then it seems like a continuation. Once I have the cutout, I'll place it over the stamped gifts. Now I can position the balloons where I want them to appear. When I remove the mask, it looks like the balloons are behind, right? Let me do another one and show you how fun this can be. I'm building up a scene here by placing balloons behind a cake this time. I masked off the cake to position the balloons. I also created a bunch of balloons by positioning them behind the first bunch of balloons. Finally, I can color the scene and place it on a card. One great application for the cutout method is arranging florals. If you have 2 or 3 different sets of floral stamps and you want to create a bouquet, this is a great way to cut out the stamped image of a floral and use it as a mask, and then overlay or superimpose the next set of stamps and make them look like they are a part of a bouquet. To our next hack. This technique involves using sticky notes again for masking off areas that I want to avoid going over when applying inks or these pastes. I have my Altenew sticky mat. So the difference between this technique and the previous technique is I was masking off an image to be able to superimpose something else to make it look like it was a part of the original stamped image. But for this technique, I am going to hide certain areas of the stencil so that other areas don't get affected by my ink blending or paste application. I have my Altenew sticky mat with a 6x6 piece of cardstock. I'll use the Snowy Delight stencil set for this demo, but I won't use all the layers, just the snowflakes and snowdrops, so I can show you the hack. I want to add ink to these smaller snowdrops and want to make sure I don't go into the larger ones. So I'll position these sticky notes so the larger ones are covered. This allows me to have precise control over the area I want to apply the ink to. I'll do the same when I apply the pastes. Before I learned this trick, I had a very limited number of options when stenciling. Now it allows me to use multiple techniques and media without the stress. Another invaluable hack I learned from Gina K is using a sticky note to guard your ink blended vellum from getting fingerprints and smudges. When you're ink blending on vellum, the ink stays wet a lot longer than it would on regular cardstock. And when you're ink blending, you need to hold your vellum down so it doesn't move. Holding it down with your fingers directly would be a disaster because you'll get fingerprints on the vellum. A great way to prevent this is to take a sticky note, put your fingers on the adhesive band of the sticky note, and voila, you have a temporary guard for your fingers, because when you place that sticky note on the vellum and hold your vellum down that way, it will not leave any marks or smudges on the vellum. You'll just have to remember to set the vellum aside once the ink blending is done and allow it to dry before you touch it again. But having this finger guard when I'm ink blending vellum has been such a game changer for me. The next set of hacks has saved me so much stress and so many supplies. It's truly unbelievable. Are you ready to rescue yourself from sticky situations? If you said yes, let's get started. Let's look at some gluing hacks now, and I have quite a few of them for you. So this next one is another tip on how to glue vellum. I just created the sentiment, and I also have a shadow die for the sentiment. I use vellum to create the shadow, and now I want to adhere the sentiment to the vellum. However, I need to ensure that no glue oozes out onto the vellum, because glue on the vellum will create really ugly marks. Even a little bit will show on the vellum since it's translucent. So here's what I'll do. I'll apply some glue behind the sentiment and let it sit for a few seconds and allow the glue to dry a little, which will make it tacky. Once the glue gets tacky, there's very little chance of it oozing out. As I'm allowing it to dry, I can see that the wet look is fading and becoming a little more matte. I'll wait another 5 or 10 seconds and then stick it down. I picked up this hack from Cathy Zielske, but the idea is more about letting glue become tacky to prevent oozing. And since I work with vellum quite often and I love using it on my cards, this hack has been incredibly helpful. Now, even if I have to reposition the sentiment, the vellum doesn't get stained by the wet glue. Everything is now aligned and you can see there are no glue marks on the vellum. It looks absolutely perfect. Here's another hack for adhering vellum, so it creates a bit of separation from the background. This technique creates more diffusion and doesn't pick up the color or pattern from the base. To do that, I'll apply glue behind the sentiment where it will hide it. I learned this from Jennifer McGuire, and it works well when layering a die cut or another design element under vellum to create diffusion. When using this method, it's crucial to let the glue become tacky before sticking it down. After aligning everything carefully, the vellum creates a subtle separation between the card panel and the sentiment, even on pattern or dark cardstock. This approach works wonderfully for gluing intricate dies or even creating layers behind a die cut, sentiment, or label. The next hack is about using double-sided adhesive sheets like the one from Altenew, because it makes it even easier to adhere vellum neatly without visible glue marks, especially if you want to stick vellum directly onto cardstock. For embossed vellum or delicate designs, this method ensures a clean and professional finish. So I'll apply this piece of double-sided adhesive sheet behind this piece of embossed vellum and then adhere this to the card panel here. Look at how easy this was, and you cannot even see the adhesive at all. Another brilliant hack I picked up from Jennifer is using press and seal to gather up a set of elements at once, ensuring the arrangement stays intact. This is what I mean. Here you see me trying out an arrangement for the florals and foliage. Once I have the arrangement up to my liking, I use a small piece of press and seal and lay it down carefully over the arrangement and press it down so the pieces get temporarily adhered to the press and seal. I can then pick up the press and seal and apply adhesive behind the different elements, making sure they make contact with the card panel to the different elements where necessary. Once I've applied adhesive, I can pick up the press and seal and reposition the arrangement adhesive side down onto the card panel and hold it down for a few seconds so the adhesive has an opportunity to dry a little. Now I can very carefully peel back the press and seal and the arrangement and attach any loose element as needed. This arrangement remains intact and the transparent press and seal makes it really easy to position it on the card front. This hack has saved me hours of stressing over rearranging every element in the perfect place when gluing them down. By the way, I have 2 full videos on vellum techniques where I share lots of ideas on different kinds of adhesives and gluing techniques, along with ideas on how you can incorporate vellum in your card designs. I'll put the links in the description below, so make sure you check them out. This next one is using microdot sheets from Salmon Says Stamp, and it's a great option for gluing together intricate die cuts. There are similar products available, but I particularly like the Salmon Says Stamp brand because of the density of the microdots. To apply glue using the sheet, simply place it on the sticky side of the sheet and rub the die cut firmly to ensure you pick up the tiny glue dots onto the surface of the die cut. A pair of tweezers can help lift the die cut off the sticky sheet, but sometimes the glue may not cover the die cuts evenly, so it's important to check and reapply if necessary. Patience is key here, especially when working with delicate die cuts. Another simple hack involves using a makeup sponge to apply glue evenly to intricate die cuts. This prevents the glue from oozing and keeps the card front clean. By dabbing the glue onto the die cut, you can adhere layers seamlessly, which works well for both sentiment and intricate decorative dies. If parts of the glued die cut start to come apart, another simple hack involves using a strip of paper with a small amount of glue applied to the edge can be used to maneuver into the gaps between layers and stick them down. This reinforces the areas, and this hack was inspired by BB Cameron and ensures that the layers are securely adhered without visible glue residue. Let's move on to the next step. This next hack is from Cathy Zielske, and it's all about how to clean up all the hairy fibers from your die cuts using washi tape. Simply dab the tape over the hairy or fibrous edges and it will lift the debris, leaving the die cut clean and polished. This simple trick keeps intricate designs looking sharp and professional. By combining these techniques, you can create stunning, layered, and intricate die cut designs with minimal fuss and mess. The next hack will give you the confidence of restoring your dark colored cardstock to its original glory when you're heat embossing, and I've never seen anyone do this before. Keep watching. Remember how difficult it gets to remove the cloudy grayish residue that's left behind when we use anti-static powder? Well, this hack is all about how to restore the original color of your cardstock, especially if it's a dark colored one. It took me a while to figure out this hack, and now I can heat emboss on dark colored cardstock with confidence. I'll heat emboss a couple of sentiments using this Pinkfresh Studio Fluttering Butterflies set. Before heat embossing, we all know it's important to apply anti-static powder. However, look at how gray and cloudy this looks. Now let's do the heat embossing, and I'll show you how to handle that. I'll use gold embossing powder and heat set it. Now it's done. I'll let it cool off for a few seconds while I gather my tools. For this process, I need a dry Swiffer cloth, a regular eraser that I got from my local dollar store, and my fine detail eraser. Now that the embossing has cooled down, I'll first use the Swiffer cloth to get the excess powder off. It's already looking better. Then I'll use my regular eraser, carefully working around the heat embossing to avoid removing the shine. You can see the original color being restored almost completely. I always keep a fluffy brush handy because it makes cleaning up a lot easier. I got this from my dollar store as well, and it's a very handy tool to have around your craft room. Now I need to get into tighter spots, so I'll use my fine detail eraser for that. I'm using an electric eraser for this because this one's got a really fine eraser tip, but I'm not using it in power mode. I'm being very gentle, barely touching the cardstock. As you can see, the results are amazing. I'm sure you can tell the difference between the cloudy and restored areas. The shine of the heat embossing is intact and the residue is gone. If you don't have a Swiffer cloth, you can skip straight to the eraser step, but using the cloth first reduces the time needed with the erasers. The next couple of hacks are just to help you be more resourceful. They're nice to know when you want to add a little interest to your design elements or when you're scoring your cardstock. Let's check them out. Alright, so remember the sentiment we created a few minutes ago? Here is a hack from Jennifer McGuire for adding dimension on top and creating puffy design elements with glossy accents. It is called glossy accents, and it comes with a fine tip that you can apply directly onto your design. I find it such an easy and fun thing to add to my card designs because all you have to do is just go over the sentiment or any other design element with the glossy accent. Since this is such a thin script, I'll need to be careful so I don't go over onto the vellum. It looks a little cloudy when you're applying it, but it dries crystal clear and glossy. It's a thin area, so it's drying fast, and you can probably already see that it's looking glossy and a bit puffy. Here's a card that I made. These elements look like puffy stickers, don't they? Here's another one from Jennifer. When it's hard to tell which side of your stencil is the right side up or which direction is correct, you can take a Sharpie and create a marking on the stencil as a reminder. I like to mark my stencils with a red upward arrow placed on the right corner. You might want to find your own symbol and position, but make a note to always use the same symbol in the same place so you don't get confused. And once I create the marking, I cover it with a small piece of transparent tape, which protects it from getting erased when I clean my stencils with either alcohol or even water. Sharpies are alcohol based, but repeated cleaning with regular water will also fade the marking. This is a really useful hack from Jennifer McGuire. Imagine if I want to slice this narrow piece of cardstock. I'd struggle to get this even under the plastic strip here, whatever it's called, leave alone cut it. So here is what Jennifer does. She attaches a sticky note to the strip. That makes it so much easier to slide it into position. And now, if you want to hold this and cut a really narrow strip, look at how easy it is to just hold this and cut it down to whatever size you desire. Moving on to the final hack. Here's something I learned from Gina K. If you have a small scoring board and want to score larger pieces of paper like an 8.5 by 11 sheet, you can make it work. For example, I'll score at 5.5 inches on one side, and since my scoring board is small, I'll turn the paper around and score it at 5.5 inches down again. Then fold and cut it down at 4.25 inches. And voila, I have an A2 10-fold card. Now, if you love the look of vellum and you're looking for tips and tricks on how to use it, you should check out this video here.